Evergrande, the second largest real estate company in China and what was once the most valuable real estate company in the world, is on the brink of collapse. You may have only started hearing that name recently, but the truth is, this has been a long time coming. The company has been struggling to repay its debts for well over a year now, and its leverage has been viewed as a problem in waiting for over 10 years. Now, there are those who claim that the power and the influence of the CCP is so great and mighty that there is no such thing as a problem in China. They claim that all this debt, all these problems, the risk to Evergrande itself and the risk of contagion to the rest of the markets can be fixed with one simple phone call from Xi. To those who believe that, all I can ask is, why hasn't that phone call been made? Why have the CCP allowed it to get to this point? Why are they not fixing the problem that you claim is so easy to solve? There are also those who claim that this whole Evergrande debacle isn't even a problem and that it's been blown way out of proportion by Western propaganda. Now, I don't know about you, but personally, I think that when Chinese citizens feel the need to protest by kidnapping one of Evergrande's top executives, there's a problem. This man is literally being held hostage by protesters as a bargaining chip to try and get their money back. When a company that's on the brink of collapse has been trying to coerce its own employees to bail them out, I think there's a problem. Evergrande have been telling their workers that they have a choice: lend their employers money or lose your bonuses. These are not normal things that happen when a company is fine. Evergrande is on fire, and that fire is already starting to spread. We are just waiting to see if that fire can be tamed or if it will consume the entire economy. But today, I'm going to explain a new theory that goes some way in explaining what is going on. This theory basically propagates the idea that this crash is orchestrated by the CCP, that they have been aware that it's coming and that they believe it is the only way to move the economy away from its toxic debt-laden growth model and into a safer and more secure future. But first, really quickly, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're putting out loads of content constantly that you don't want to miss out on. So in short, this theory, which I want to make clear is in no way confirmed as true, states that what we're seeing happening right now is the result of a CCP-initiated policy to reduce the amount of leverage in China. It started with the 3 red lines put in place by the CCP 1 year ago. These red lines put limits on how much debt a company can have in regards to their assets, their cash, and their profits. The purpose of these red lines was to stop a financial crisis forming in China that would take down the entire country's financial system if left unchecked. The real estate sector is huge in China. It's also hugely over-leveraged. Even though those red lines, the new rules put in place by the CCP, are not even remotely strict, the majority of Chinese real estate companies failed to meet their requirements. In short, pretty much every company in that industry in China had more debt than they could handle and also more debt than they were allowed. But the problems don't only come from too much debt. They also come from the practices of these companies in Xi's China. One of these practices that Evergrande excelled at was to buy up land at really high prices, far higher than the fair market value, in order to build developments on them. The purchase price of this land didn't matter to Evergrande because all the risk was transferred over to the buyers of the apartment and the banks that financed the developments. The model worked because the housing market was booming and houses, apartments and land was all appreciating at such crazy rates. No one ever made a loss, as even though the land was grossly overvalued and the apartments that were sold to Chinese citizens were also overvalued, within a year of the development starting, the market prices had overtaken the initially inflated values. But as prices continued to rise, an affordability crisis started to develop. Major cities and even smaller cities were starting to become unaffordable, leading to household debt soaring in comparison to pretty much every other economic metric. Household debt as a percentage of GDP has increased from 40% in 2018 to over 60% today, and it's been fueled by a speculative housing market bubble. Already this is starting to look dangerous, but the problems don't stop there. Real estate has been a huge industry in China for years now, but it's also been sucking money and investment away from more productive industries. The Chinese market has been misallocating capital into the real estate industry because of how profitable it has been, as a result of the huge bubble characterized by Chinese ghost cities. The capital that has flowed into real estate has not been flowing into high-tech, productive and innovative sectors like IT, energy or materials, which has been hampering their growth. As a percentage of China's GDP, Their exports for these high-tech, valuable industries have actually stalled over the last 10 years. Now, the theory goes that at some point, it became imperative that lending in the real estate sector was reined in order to reallocate capital to more productive industries that aren't based on a huge speculative bubble. The real estate sector couldn't be allowed to continue to balloon, as it would just exacerbate the problem and continue sucking in capital. From this point on, China can't reverse course. They can't allow the industry to lever up again to continue its growth. And they also can't allow consumers to continue to spend their cash on apartments. The tail risk from this new environment being created by the CCP is what is causing the crash of Chinese corporations' bonds. Their stock market fails. And that's also why the damage isn't limited to just Evergrande. Within the construction industry, there are far more credit collapses than you probably realize. China Fortune Land Development had liabilities of $61 billion and they defaulted back in January. China South City Holdings have $10 billion of liabilities and their bonds are currently trading at 60% of their supposed value. Yuzhou have $21 billion of liabilities and their debt is currently worth 80% of what it should be worth. Sichuan Langjiang with $31 billion of liabilities whose bonds are currently trading at 25% of their book value. Rise Sun, Central China Real Estate, Sunshine City, Fantasia and Guangzhou R&F, who combined have almost $150 billion of liabilities, have all seen their share prices and their bond prices collapse in recent weeks. All of this is without even mentioning the elephant amongst them all. Evergrande, who has hogged up all the headlines, who have over $300 billion of liabilities and they are practically insolvent as we speak. So what does this tell us? Well, Evergrande is not unique. It's just the most vocal of the herd, and credit has been getting squeezed for months as more and more companies get closer to defaulting. The sell-offs have been getting more violent, the drops have been happening quicker than before, as if they are entering the endgame. This isn't a coincidence, this is a chain reaction. If one developer defaults, lenders reduce their lending to other developers. And every time a developer defaults, it makes every other company more likely to fail as well. What's more, each time a company collapses, it causes a fire sale which then damages the underlying values of the development projects which all this debt is meant to finance. The theory goes that while this was orchestrated by the CCP, even they can't stop it anymore. The rot has been discovered and it's causing the whole damn building to fall down. The CCP want to deleverage the industry and they thought they could do it without contagion, without the collapse spreading into every aspect of the Chinese economy, but it now looks like they were wrong. As the collapses spread, China will try to keep the financial sector safe with temporary policy responses like liquidity injections, which have been done just this last week. But we should not expect a turnaround, because once this got started, it was never going to stop, and it's not going to remain contained either. The question is no longer about whether or not more bankruptcies and collapses are coming, it's about which companies will fall first and when these collapses will spill into the banking sector. Rural Chinese banks who have the worst exposure to these grossly overvalued property markets are the most obvious candidates for banking failures, but they're not the only ones at risk. Ping An, the only insurer in the company to be labelled as systematically important, have seen their share price halve since the beginning of the year. Most reporting seems to suggest that their losses were due to direct investment in the construction industry, but they were also ordered to stop selling alternative investment products. Unfortunately, Chinese reporting requirements are far from transparent, and that's why we have to talk about corporate bonds so much. It's the only data we have. Most lending, however, is bank and trust loans, which is far more opaque. We know that these banks have huge exposure to these developers, and we know that their capital is withering. Evergrande's liabilities alone include 128 banks and 121 non-banking institutions, along with 4 million jobs and 1.7 million apartments that have yet to be delivered. People claiming that the risk of contagion is minimal are foolish to say the least, because it's already started. The VIX, an index which tracks volatility, basically a number that gets higher as a recession edges closer, has spiked to its highest reading since the pandemic caused a crash. Hong Kong stocks have crashed, futures as well, as the markets have finally started to panic about the Evergrande default. Commodity markets are destined to fall and they've already started to adjust. Dalian iron ore has already seen its share price plummet. Australian miners are starting to take hits as well, but the near future for commodities is far grimmer than just that. It's generally well known that China's share of global commodity use ranges from 40 to 70%, but what share of global consumption is China's property sector? Well, 20% of global steel production goes to the Chinese property sector. 20% of global copper as well, 9% of aluminium, 5% of zinc, and 8% of nickel. So, is Evergrande a big deal to commodity markets? The simple answer is yes. And if there's any doubt in your mind about the severity of this all, you just need to look at what's happening on the ground. In a country where 30 years ago, over 2,000 people were murdered and students in Hong Kong constantly go missing because they are peacefully protesting, these citizens are still out in force, making their thoughts known, without fear from the CCP, because if Evergrande collapses, they will lose their livelihood anyway. Contagion has already started. You just need to know where to look. If you're new to the channel and you enjoyed this video, then make sure to subscribe. If you want to help spread the word, then consider liking the video and leaving a comment, and YouTube will do its part by pushing this video out to more people just like you. I really do appreciate all the support you give the channel, even if it's just leaving a like. Down below, there's a link to my favorite brokerage called eToro, where you can trade stocks and shares, crypto, commodities, foreign currencies, and more, all for 0% commission. There's also a link to BlockFi, where you can get $250 in free Bitcoin, and you can earn interest on whatever crypto you hold. Whether it's Bitcoin, Ether, or even stablecoins, you can earn as much as 14% interest a year. I have also started up 2 other channels, Stoic Finance 2, which is going to be focused on macroeconomics and the housing market and big ticket stuff like that. I'm also working on setting up my own website where I'll post videos and articles in the future, and I've got a Patreon in the works as well. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for all the support. Until next time.